presence for coming here today. Thank you for making the choice to come here. Each of you made that choice to say yes to come this morning. So it's humbling, and I'm grateful. Thank you. So as I re-entered the created world that we humans have made from my trip, I've had a little bit of trouble with re-entry. Christine tells me that I'm not all back yet, and I have to agree with her. In fact, I'm not sure I want to be all back. So I want to share with you what happened for me on this trip and how it relates to unity principles. One of the things that indicated that I'm not all back from the trip is I worked on the talk title and blurb and with Beverly, our wonderful office manager, and I thought I sent it to her Thursday morning so it could be in a newsletter, and it wasn't in there. So this morning I was thinking, did I really send that thing? I didn't send it. I copied it from the Word document and I got ready to send it, but it never got out. So here's the blurb. Don't blame Beverly. If you want to blame, which isn't really fun, then blame me. But here's what we're going to talk about today. Hearing the voice of God. So I went to Lake Superior. Lake Superior is the largest of the 5 Great Lakes in North America. It has enough water in the lake to cover North and South America a foot deep, the whole thing. It's such a big lake that it creates its own weather. The Ojibwe called it Gitche Gumi, which means great sea. I call her the Great Mother. She's a beautiful, beautiful creature that you can feel miles away if you can feel energy. So Myrtle Fillmore, one of our founders, got it. She said, "Nature is surely the glorified face of God. See the beauty about you and see the manifestation of the infinite mind." The created world provides us messages all the time, over and over and over again, and it's our job to listen. I came to believe in this trip that as humans, we've got this arrogance that we've got a bunch of things figured out. We have no clue what's going on in this mystery. We have no clue. We've spent hundreds of years, Western science, trying to, tease things out and find out about how people are healthy and how they're sick and how things work, and we've hardly touched the tip of the iceberg, much less the whole iceberg. So what happened for me, this is a view along the shore of my favorite place on Lake Superior. What happened for me in this experience is I was humbled, very humbled. One of the things about the place I go, it's in the Porcupine Mountain Wilderness State Park. It's the largest old-growth forest left in the continental U.S. 44,000 acres of trees that have been untouched by logging by humans. And so it's got beautiful, huge trees. It's also got lots of trees that have fallen. That's part of the forest regeneration. So as you see in the distance there, there's a tree that fell into the lake. Here's a close-up of that. This tree coming down is the one that goes into the lake. There's another one that's fallen on top of it. There's just all kinds of trees falling down in this beautiful wilderness. So, you know, the little boy in me says, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, does it make a sound? Anybody else have that question happen in their life? Well, as I was listening to God, God said, of course, silly human. Do you think you're the only one with ears? What about mice and squirrels and chipmunks and deer? And, you know, then what about insects and reptiles? They feel vibration. Yeah, so all kinds of creatures hear a tree falling in the forest. And we, in our egotistical sense, think that, well, if it doesn't happen on my watch, then it doesn't happen, right? So, of course. So that opened me up. That lesson in humility helped me to realize that, you know, maybe we're just not listening to God. Maybe God's got all kinds of things going on that we've just barely touched on. So there's the first sunset, first night, that same tree into the water. This is the sand on the beach. It reminded me of lightning strikes. The little lines there. Maybe God's talking to us there. Maybe the same lightning strikes, the same pattern happens on the beach too. Maybe that's the language of God. The first night I was there, the lake was really calm, and about 6 inches under the water on this shelf of rock were these patterns. That's little mounds of sand that were about 1/4 of an inch high, and it was as big as from that chair to Debbie, all patterned on this big rock. What if that's God's language and we just don't know that language? Because I reached down and I touched into the water the sand and it just dissipated. It just, spread out. God's talking. So this is a view of the river that you watched in the meditation up on a bridge above the river. And as you see, there's a lot going on in nature, a lot of things. One of the things that goes on is that God has put on board everything that every part of nature needs to survive. So I'm going to talk particularly about a couple of things. One, the northern white cedar tree. It's very prominent in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. The northern white cedar tree is this tree here that you see has fallen over and a new shoot has come up and grown. So one of the things that principle that God put into the northern white cedar tree is the ability to, when it falls over, to repropagate. It just starts growing from wherever it hits the ground, if the ground conditions are right. So we can learn from that. When we fall down, can we repropagate? You know, we've got everything on board, just as the northern white cedar. We keep going. We keep growing. Whatever your story is, whatever challenges you've had in the past, life helps you repropagate. Principle put within you the ability to keep going and keep growing, to keep becoming everything that you were made to be. So this is a close-up of the lichen that's growing just on the ledge above the river that you watched the video of. These lichen have everything they need. At Lake Superior, the average snowfall a year is 200 inches. 200 inches. These little guys have been given by their Creator everything they need to survive, both the summer and the winter. Right? They drop down into, kind of a hibernation when it's cold. In the summer, they're up, popping up with their little mouths. It almost looks like little birds going, "Give me water." Beautiful, beautiful. The other thing that I failed to mention about the cedar is the cedar has been given the ability to develop epicutical wax on its leaves every winter. It gets a thick coating of wax that seals the leaves, and because it gets so dry in the winter and the roots can't pull moisture up from the ground because the ground's frozen solid, so it gets this wax across its leaves that helps it survive the winter. These trees are older than we are. They survive something that we couldn't survive without a lot of intervention. So one of our way showers is Jesus. Jesus got it. Jesus spoke to us and told us what we need to know. For this reason I say to you, do not be worried about your life as to what you will eat or what you will drink, nor for your body as to what you will put on. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air, that they do not sow nor reap, nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not worth much more than they? And who of you, by being worried, can add a single hour to his life? Actually, as humans, we've figured out that if we worry, we take away hours from our life, right? And why are you worried about clothing? Observe how the lilies of the field grow. They do not toil, nor do they spin. Yet I say to you that not even Solomon in all his glory clothed himself like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which is alive today, and tomorrow is thrown into the furnace, will he not much more clothe you? So, if cedars have everything they need on board, put there by their Creator, why wouldn't we have everything we need on board, put there by our Creator? So then it got me thinking about what kind of language God uses, or what kind of languages. And I got kind of focused on what some people are calling fractals, which are reoccurring geometric shapes. It's the best way I can describe it. And so here's the breaking up of a stone with beautiful geometric shapes. beautiful chunks, the way it just breaks up from the heat and the water and the freezing, all of that creating more and more things for life to continue. And life does continue. Life keeps growing. We keep growing. Part of us is breaking down and releasing. Part of us is being built up and regenerating, just like nature, just like God intended. This is the trunk of an aspen tree. What if that's God's Morse code? I mean, what if? Why not? We think we've got it all figured out and we're the only ones that can communicate. Maybe God's given us Morse code. If I were to interpret that, I have a little bit of a biased filter that says, I love you. Because God loved that tree enough to put on board everything it needed. It needs that bark. And if we're smart enough, maybe someday we'll figure out, what those little lines do to benefit the tree. I don't know. Maybe somebody's already figured that out. So even in the destruction of life, there's pattern. This is a log that was sitting on the beach. And I took this picture thinking, wow, I wonder, that I do a lot of hiking, so I see a lot of topography maps. I wonder if every log that decays has a matching topography somewhere on the planet. And that's just a pattern that God has instilled in life that just keeps reciprocating over and over again. Because I could probably, if I did a search and matched that up, I could probably find a hillside that matched the topography of that log, of the way that it grew each year. So one of the beautiful things about camping on Lake Superior's southern shore is the sunsets. This was one of them. This is the tree that I took the picture from that we started with. This tree has been there every year that I've been there. It's probably older than I am. It's got a beautiful perch place. These two parts coming out from the picture are parts of the tree that fell over at some point and then grew out into, looks like another tree, but it's actually part of the same tree. There's more that's fallen over. You can see that one leaning over the other way. That's another one, another part of that tree. And so here she is on the edge of Lake Superior making a life, right? She's right on the shore. There's water sometimes will, splash up on her, I'm sure in the winter, which I haven't been there in the winter. The snow and ice will pack up against her to the point that when you look inside those roots, you see life continuing to generate. That's inside the roots of that tree. So each of these, to me, what I did is I switched channels. I switched channels from the channel of, everyday social life and knowing about what's going on in American politics and, all my clients and all of that stuff, all of those channels, I switched channels to God's channel, to listening to God. And so I'd invite you to think about what channels you listen to. What channels do you tune to? What are your presets? What are you normally spending your time listening to? And like I said at the beginning, I'm not all back, and I'm not sure that I want to be all back. I want to keep that channel open. That's me and my tree. Yep. And so that's the sunset from that night. And I don't want to end the talk without talking briefly about a couple of people who have sunsetted in the last few weeks. John McCain and Aretha Franklin. And I want to point out to end my talk today that each of them are noteworthy in my mind because they listened to their own channel. They listened to their channel. John McCain listened to the channel of his values. That's why he was considered a maverick, because he wasn't first a Republican, he was second a Republican. He was first a person who lived the values that he felt, regardless of what public opinion was or what other people said or what his political party's position was. He lived it. I don't necessarily agree with some of the values that he lived, but I honor the fact that he lived his values. He listened to his channel. And then we have the Queen of Soul. She became the Queen of Soul because she listened to what her Creator put on board for her. Right? She took what she was given by her Creator and made it everything she could. And so she became the Queen of Soul. So, in closing, I want to ask you, what do you want to be the king or queen of? What do you want to spend so much time listening to your channel that you make it so manifest in the world that it just beams, that it just is exuding who you are? Not for the accolades. If Aretha Franklin did it for the accolades, she wouldn't have been as good as she was. She did it because she tapped into who she was and what her Creator told her was on board, and she lived it. So, I'd invite you to check the channel that you're listening to on a regular basis. Maybe expand the channels that you tune to, and find a channel that is going to maximize who you are in the world, in all your beauty, and all your humanness. Be the best you can be. So, I don't normally do this, but I feel called to see if there's any comments or questions, any brief statements that anybody'd like to make about the talk today or finding your channel. Teddy?
When I was much, much younger and even much more confused than I am now, I can talk up if you want. When I was in my early 20s, I was a very unhappy human being. I had Kate, who was just an infant, and I had no purpose or direction in my life whatsoever. And so I was just kind of like schlepping along. And one day I discovered Rehoboth Beach. It just drew me like a magnet. I had never been to a beach in my life. People in Sterling back then didn't do that sort of thing. And I sat at the ocean, and I listened to the ocean, absolutely certain there was something it was telling me. And I could never figure it out. I'd go at night and stay till 11, 12 o'clock at night, just listening. And I got more peace from that than I have from any material good or friendship, a great love. And I'm not dissing any of that. That was just spoken to me, and it was mine to figure out. And it took me one heck of a long time to do that. But basically it's come down to just be me and let it go. Don't hold on to stuff. Don't judge stuff. Just be what your intuition tells you to be. Do what it says is right, and you'll be okay. So I appreciate your talk today.
Sorry, Mom, signal first.
So last year, I spent 3 days in the woods. I'll tell you, the first day was I think that was the hardest part because I had to let go of what was normal. But the second and third night, I didn't want to come back. And that was a great part of me that is still there waiting for me to go back to find myself again. Thank you so much for this today. That was a great reminder of how important it is to disconnect from the rat race here. And I've been on one here in the last few months, but it's so important to slow down and get back to the truth of who you are. And sometimes you can't find that until you're just listening to the inner voices of your own, to find your own scratches in the bark, so to speak.
I brought a prop today. This is actually a stick that is driftwood that just was on the beach, and it's a perfect walking stick. So it just, I mean, yeah, man couldn't make a better one.
So as a little kid, I grew up at Lake Tahoe, California, Nevada, and I used to go out into this meadow. It was like a marsh, and I actually took little planks of wood and made like a walkway through this marsh because it was squishy. And I would get to this place which I called like Gilligan's Island, and there was the trees, and there was an eagle's nest, and I used to just look at God's world there. And when I came back across that marsh, I knew that I would keep going back there because that was my little place. And I found that my purpose there was just to be God's kid and to always cherish the little girl inside of me no matter what. No matter what trials or tribulations, no matter what adults' responsibilities, it was always just to know inside that I was God's kid. And that's what I've held on to.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so grateful for your speech because I am very connected with nature. Trees, everything talks to me, but I've never associated it with God. It just was. And I just want to tell a little story. Last week, Mary Beth brought Tulsi with her here. And it was outside, and there was one box that said, "Straight away, take me home." So I did. and in there were the little people. And so I could not remove the Tulsi out of the box because that was, they had made it their home and wanted to come to my place. And now I have the little people. I can see little people. And now the little people are in that box. They had just moved from. So there is so much going on that we have no awareness of.
Yep.
And so, yeah, thank you for having another way of looking at it.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't going to say anything, but your talk did remind me of the first time you looked out over the Grand Canyon, and it takes your breath away, and the thought, my God, this is the face of God. And it's so overwhelming that you want to get back to it. One other thing you cleared up for me was the word Gitchigumi. You know that there's a poem or something that's from the shores of Gitchigumi too.
Right. Yep.
And I never knew what it meant.
Yeah.
So thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I too wasn't going to speak it, but I see God in the beauty of the world. But just driving out of my driveway, going around the different ways I have to get out of the development I live in, I looked up and there was this, which is what I always look for and which I always see God in, beautiful, beautiful blue skies, white clouds, green trees. And I said, that's where I see God. I've seen that, as I look back, I've seen it a lot of years. But I'm acknowledging it now and understanding that that's God talking to me and has been talking to me for years.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a beauty.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all. Now we're going to get to hear the voice of God with Andrea's beautiful music.